Hello, welcome to RCC's Math Tape 068, Solving Equations by Factoring. In this lesson we will learn to solve quadratic equations by the methods of a common factor and guess and check. At the conclusion of the lesson we'll work application problems. Be sure to take careful notes and to mark on your paper any place you don't understand so you can get help on it when you go to the lab. Now let's begin. The objective on this tape is to solve quadratic equations that can be factored. Solve quadratic equations that can be factored. The basis for our solution method is a rule known as the principle of zero products. The principle of zero products says this: if the product of two factors is zero, then at least one of the factors must be zero. If the product of two factors is zero, then at least one of the factors must be zero. Remember that product means we're multiplying two expressions. That is, if we're multiplying two factors and the answer we get is zero, then at least one of the factors must be zero. Let's take an example and go through the steps. Our first example is a quadratic equation. We recognize it as quadratic because the highest exponent is 2. We're to solve x squared, subtract 5x, add 6 equals 0. To begin with, we need to factor the left member, and this factorization is going to be relatively easy since the first term in our quadratic equation is x squared. That means that when we write our factors, we'll have x and x in the first positions. Then, to get 6, we would use either 6 and 1 or 2 and 3. And to get negative for the middle term, we must use both of these negatives. We're going to get positive 6 when we multiply two negatives, and our factors we can easily determine will be 2 and 3 to get the 6, both negative. So we have x minus 2 times x minus 3 is equal to 0. Now, here are two factors whose product is 0. The first factor, x minus 2, the second factor, x minus 3. Their product is 0. Therefore, one or the other of them must be 0. And so, we set each factor equal to 0 and solve the little equations that result. Either x minus 2 is equal to 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. First factor is 0 or the second factor is 0. Now we'll solve these two equations. The x minus 2 is 0. To solve, we must get rid of the 2 that's subtracted, so we'll add 2 to both sides. X minus 2 plus 2 is 0 plus 2. On the left we get x, on the right we get 2, and there is an answer. X is equal to 2. Our other factor, x minus 3, we have x minus 3 equals 0. We go through the same process. X, subtract 3. We add 3 to both sides, equals 0, add 3. And we get x on the left. 0 add 3 is 3. And so our result is x equals 3. As always, we should check our work. Where do you check an equation? Where do you check any problem? You always check it back in the original. The original was x squared, subtract 5x, add 6 equals 0. So we're going to check the x equals 2 and the x equals 3 in the original equation. Since there are two possible answers, we must check them both separately. So we write down two check arrangements. X squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0 for the first one, and for the second one. If we fill in 2 Then, in our set of parentheses where we're filling in, we'll fill in 2. And this gives us 2 squared, 4. Subtract, 5 times 2 is 10. Add 6. 4 subtract 10 is negative 6. Negative 6 add 6 is 0. And we get 0 on the left to match the 0 on the right. So this one checks. For the other possibility, we'll check 3. 3 squared. Subtract 5 times 3. Add 6. And we're supposed to get 0. Well, 3 squared is 9. Subtract 15. Add 6. 9 subtract 15 is negative 6. Negative 6 add 6 is 0. 0 is the same as 0, so that one checks as well. Now this means that both of the answers are correct. And our solution will be x equals 2 or x equals 3. So we can write our solution finally as x equals 2 or x equals 3. This gives us 2 answers for the equation, and our original equation was a quadratic, a second degree equation, and we've discovered that in this problem we get 2 answers that check. That will always be true of every quadratic equation. We'll get 2 answers that check. Very rarely the 2 answers are the same value, but we count that as a double solution and always say that a quadratic equation will have 2 answers. Now let's formalize the method of solution that we've seen in this example. I'm going to give you a rule for solving quadratic equations by factoring. Write this down on your paper in your notes so that you can use it as you solve all quadratic equations by this method. So this is a very important rule which you want to put on your study sheet and use to work with quadratic equations by factoring. To solve quadratic equations by factoring, step 1 is put in standard form. Put in standard form. Now, standard form means the left member is in descending order and the right member is 0. Left member in descending order, the right member 0. Step 2, factor the left member. Factor the left member. Step 3, set each factor equal to 0. Set each factor equal to 0. Step 4, solve each equation. Remember that you'll have 2 factors, so that means you'll have 2 equations. Finally, check in the original equation. The check is optional, but highly recommended. I'm going to show the check on some of our examples, but then to save time and make the tape a bit shorter, I won't go through the check every time. And I recommend highly that you check in the original equation every time just to be sure you haven't made a mistake.